Hey everyone, welcome to All Things Iceland. It's Jules and I'm at the beautiful Kvettenfoss behind me, which funny enough is pretty easy to get to. Hop, skip and a jump from Skogafoss. But today's video is about what I hate about living in Iceland. And yes, I know hate is a strong word, take it with a grain of salt. And if you haven't seen the video about what I love, definitely go check that out. But this will kind of give you a little bit more insight about some of the things that are not so much fun about living in the country. While the most of these are not in any kind of order, the first one is definitely the most hated for me, and that has to do with icy sidewalks and streets in the country. So you can find them in Reykjavik, you can find it in the north, you can find everywhere pretty much whenever there's winter time. There's a thick layer of ice that forms, and it's very difficult to keep up with like shoveling this or, you know, putting down a lot of salt. It's not very good for the roads or for the sidewalks. So often if you visit and you're not like in the center of downtown where there's hot water pipes under the sidewalks or the streets, you're driving on pure ice. And the crazy thing to me, and I've never gotten used to it, is that Icelanders are walking around with regular shoes, just kind of like almost ice skating. I mean, granted, they're not all slipping, but there is this idea of not really using micro spikes or kind of being more for tourists. And I personally feel like it's dangerous for myself to not use micro spikes. And often when I'm going outside, I'm really careful about where I'm walking. And it's just not fun, basically, at the idea that I could perhaps hurt myself just walking from my door to the car or, you know, to the supermarket. Another one is that licorice in Iceland and in Nordic countries in general is something that people absolutely love. And while I don't have a problem with the fact there's black licorice pretty much everywhere, it's that the salt and peppery licorice in particular, I'm sorry, I hate it. I'm not a fan. I totally understand and respect that other people really like it or eat it a lot. I mean, granted, I'm not a fan that there's sometimes licorice in a whole lot of candies, but if there had to be one type in particular, or at least a group of candies that are not my favorite and I would never recommend it to anyone unless I wanted to prank you, is the salt licorice or the peppery licorice. Either one of those are intense. In fact, in the salt licorice, there's actually ammonium chloride, and I'm just like, why? Why eat candy that literally has ammonium in it? Like, it's nasty for me. And like I said, if you like it, you love it, good for you, congratulations, enjoy it. You can have all of mine, but I'm not a fan at all. Number 3 is that it can be so windy here, and the windstorms are intense. Now, I've talked about it in other videos, like one of them where the wind literally sucked the window out of my apartment, and of course about other storms where there have been hurricane, gale force winds. This is no joke, and while I am used to the fact that Icelandic weather changes quite often and you can have multiple seasons within the same day, it is still not my favorite, and, you know, strongly dislike when the winds get so strong. And in Iceland, it's often the case that people are not like, oh, the winds are so strong, stay home. That is less of the occurrence, as with the other aspect where it's like, yeah, it's windy, just like, you know, be careful, hold on to your kids so they don't blow away or something like that. And that is so intense for me. And I don't really like it, to be fair. And it's not that, again, that it's anything I'm trying to change, because clearly I can't change the weather. And living here, you adapt to different things, but if it were a little less windy, I, you know, would like that. But yeah, the wind has been a really interesting aspect of getting used to life here, and something that, even though I don't particularly like it, I still find ways to cope with it, and it doesn't take away from me actually loving being out in nature. Next up has to do with a certain type of food in Iceland, specifically some of the fermented foods. Many people are aware of fermented shark, which smells really intense, but not everybody is aware of skata, which is literally skate, but it has been fermented as well. And right before Christmas, I believe it's on the 23rd, is when people cook this and they gather together and eat this food from their ancestors, in essence. And it is like the smell is just horrible. And if you're ever in like an apartment block or you go to a restaurant that's serving it, it's just an overwhelming smell. It gets into your clothes. They even say like if you're gonna eat it, make sure to wear clothes that you don't like or that you could throw away or something like that, because the smell could get trapped into your clothes forever. So I do not like this at all on that day. If you happen to go near an apartment block or somebody's house or a restaurant, and even just getting a whiff of it. I've driven on a main street, I think it was Miklabraut in Reykjavik, and there was a place that was actually preparing skata, and it just like filled up the area. That's how strong it is. So yeah, not my fave. Of course, there are a lot of people who are Icelandic who take part in this, and again, I'm respectful of that, but just be aware, if you're ever in the country on that day, you might end up smelling this intensely nasty odor that will stick with you for the rest of your life in your nostrils. Another thing that I've adapted to, but of course am not a huge fan of, is that Iceland can be very expensive. Now, yeah, food-wise, even housing, those things of course are expensive and continue to rise, but I'm even talking about like electronics or different types of things that the amount of tax that is put on top of it doesn't even make it worth it for many people to actually buy it in the country. In fact, a lot of Icelanders, and I learned this from Icelanders, is they will pack an empty suitcase when they go on vacation to like Spain or the US or other parts of Europe, just so that they can buy things to bring back because it's so expensive to buy it here. Of course, there are times where you can't actually find the product potentially in Iceland. That's changing a lot because I feel like just more variety in products and things that are being shipped, but the amount of tax is not changing. So it still ends up being that buying a new computer can be a third more or even like double the price of what you would pay somewhere else. And buying an airline ticket and going on vacation is actually less expensive to buy that thing outside of the country and bring it back than to buy it here. So yeah, not a fan of that, and it often ends up meaning that if I need something that is expensive, then I just usually wait until I'm gonna travel to go and get it. And speaking of expensive things, because you might think, all right, maybe instead of buying it inside the country, you order it and then get it delivered to the country, which is a great segue for the next thing that I strongly dislike, is that of course if you're going to get it delivered to Iceland, they're gonna make sure you pay for that. And Amazon and all of these like different services, it can depend on Amazon. Like maybe you find something and you can actually get it delivered, but once it gets here, like meaning some places don't actually deliver to Iceland at all, that's what I'm getting at. But when it actually gets here, you have to pay customs. So of course there's the delivery fee itself, which can be more than the actual cost of what you're buying. On top of that, then there's an import fee. So I've heard of people who have gone to the post office not realizing that, okay, they paid delivery, but then the import fee was gonna be more, and it was so much more expensive than what they were expecting that they were just like, send it back, I don't even want it. Like, this thing was maybe $10, but now all of a sudden I'm paying $30. Like, that was defeating the purpose of why I actually got it delivered in the first place. So these things can make it a little bit harder, just accessibility wise, to get certain things that you need for a less of a price than you would find in Iceland. Or if you can't find it at all, you still might feel like you're getting penalized for going and buying it outside of the country. Next up is plastic on food in Iceland. And I still haven't gotten a good answer about this. Maybe I need to ask people who actually produce the food. But I've gone into grocery stores in Iceland and seen cucumbers that are individually wrapped in plastic, and it's actually the Icelandic cucumbers or Icelandic paprika, which is like red bell peppers or bell peppers in general, that have plastic on them. And I don't particularly understand why it's the case, why it's ones that are made in Iceland have this distinction. It might be because maybe they want to have the label on it that clearly states it's from Iceland, but it is something that I really don't like, especially since plastic usage is something that a lot of us are trying to decrease. It just feels also really strange to individually wrap cucumbers. Like, of all the things that I'm bringing up, this one for some reason to me is just like, I really don't understand it. So if there's anyone who's watching and has a good explanation for this, definitely let me know in the comments. But I just like the fact a lot, of course, that Iceland, like many other places, has moved towards plastic-free bags in their grocery stores. So you might find some bags that look like plastic, but they're actually compostable. But still, we have like plastic wrapped around vegetables and some other things that it feels like maybe it's a bit unnecessary, in my opinion. But of course, I'm always open to being corrected or helped to understand as to why this might be necessary. So let me know in the comments if any of the things that I shared with you today about what I hate about living in Iceland surprised you, or maybe you also have experienced this and have some thoughts around it. I'd love to hear it for sure, because you know, it's always great to be able to talk with many of you in the comments and just get some of your ideas or impressions, especially if you've never been to Iceland, kind of knowing some of this information. If you enjoyed this video, definitely make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with somebody who might be curious about some of the things that are not so pleasant about Iceland. And of course, you know, I mentioned the video about what I love is down below, so you can check that one out too, because there are plenty of things, more things that I love than that I dislike about living in the country. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.